featuring stories from the leaders in venture capital. This is Venture Capital Radio with Shannon Pearson on AM 650.
Thanks for staying with us here on Venture Capital Radio on AM 650. My name is Shannon, and I'm excited to introduce to you the first silver company that I've talked about on Venture Capital Radio, and that is Huldra Silver. You can find them at huldrasilver.com, and that's Huldra silver.com. With me is Ryan Sharp, the president and CEO of the company. Ryan, thank you for joining me in the studio tonight.
Thank you for having me, Shannon.
Well, I have your website in front of me, and it is blatantly in bold letters. Huldra Silver Inc. is in the business of exploring and developing high-grade silver deposits. So as I said, I have not talked to a silver company before on this show, so I welcome the conversation and wanted to know a little bit more about your background and what brought you to the point of becoming the president and CEO of Huldra.
My background is a little diverse and probably key to becoming a successful CEO in this business. I spent 10 years managing what has become one of the largest environmental contracting companies in Canada. I left that business during my MBA in 2001, and in 2002 I entered the retail brokerage industry. I spent 7 years in that business working for two different firms, and in the last 3 years ago I left the business to focus on mining. And for the first year in that business I put together a startup company. I raised capital for various other companies, and then the opportunity with Huldra Silver came to me about just over 2 years ago. It's a company I was familiar with for a number of years, and they were sitting there coming out of the recession with very little capital, almost a fully developed mine, and with one of the highest silver resource grades in the world. So I sat down, met with management, and then ended up in a very short period of time, took over management of the company in March 2010. We raised some initial capital to move the permitting of the mine along, and then started exploration programs that year.
So in 2010, the exploration program went into full swing?
No, not really. We raised $800,000 in capital with the expectation that the amount of work required to finish the permitting was about $500,000, and the rest was for working capital. We negotiated down certain aspects of that and ended up having some excess capital, which I felt we should deploy it, showing the upside on a very limited exploration property. So we went and spent about $300,000 on an exploration program that turned out to be very successful. We found some significant discoveries outside of the main mine area, and basically got some traction in the market from that, as well as completing the necessary work for the permitting.
Well, so let's back up a little bit from there, because that was 2010, moving towards exploration, and like you say, the capital used specifically for that, and it was somewhat of a shorter timeline to take a look at the property. But you make reference on your website to 1985.
Well, in 1985, this property had been the source of sporadic development and exploration since about 1892. And in 1985, a major discovery of a high-grade galena and sphalerite vein was made on the surface of the mountain, separate from where anybody had worked before, by Magnus Bratling, my predecessor and a current director on the board. After he made that discovery, they actually did an open cut on the top of the mine in 1986, and removed 400 tons of material, averaging about 100 ounces a ton silver.
And that's impressive. Just to qualify?
That's extremely high grade. That
Okay.
was straight out of the ground and direct to the smelters at that point.
And I think that it's important to point that out in the conversation of the upside potential when you're looking at a project like that. When you get that type of result just on the surface like that, it just leads you to wanting to take more action, more exploration to see what else is under there.
Yeah, so from that, the company went public in '87, raised approximately $6 million over 2 years, and all the money, rather than spent on exploration like other companies, it was decided at the time this was a mine. 9,000 feet of underground development was put in place over 2 years. And by the time 1989 came around, the price of silver collapsed, and the mine was essentially shut in, other than a little bit of minor exploration for the next 17 years.
So is there anybody on the board currently that dates back to that time frame?
Yeah, it's Magnus Breitling, the man who made the discovery, was actually a prospector going back to the 50s and had been on this property in the early 70s and came back and restaked it in 79. So the property itself is 100% owned by the company, and it's been in the company's hands since 1980. So we are actually one of the older silver companies around with a long break in development.
Well, and very, well, mature.
Yes.
A mature company. But that background story I think is really relevant because it really positions you well for what's happening now. And as you say, 2010, that initial exploration that you rolled out, and that got you some great results. And so now we're 2012.
Yeah, so that got us, I mean, I took over this company at $13 silver with sort of an expectation that silver would be approaching 20 over the next 2 years as we went into development. Currently today it's in the low 30s, and it's been a lot higher in the time period since. So we did that exploration program, got some traction in the market, and continued on the permitting. So beyond the initial 2011 exploration, we submitted our mine permit application in March of 2011, and then went into a much larger development program. We had some bulk sample permits in place for taking 10,000 tons of underground ore. So basically we went into 2011 and built out a camp, did some further underground development, and then a much more extensive exploration program that on large areas of the property.
So operating in an exploration and development at the same time.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The mine is basically fully developed and operational now.
Mm-hmm.
We've extracted the 10,000 ton bulk sample, and we're currently back into exploration and development while we're awaiting our final permitting.
Okay. So right now the permitting is been requested.
Yeah, the permitting's in the final stages.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's exciting because it can be pretty political.
It's very political.
But you are a local story.
We are a local story. In essence, we are the closest operating underground mine to Vancouver. The mine itself is only 2.5 hours east of Vancouver, off the Coquihalla Highway. Since we also have a mill site in Merritt, BC. We purchased a former large copper producer in 2011 with a large tailings facility, and we are constructing a mill on that property right now.
So there's an ongoing exploration for other properties and...
Yeah, we've been focused primarily on the development of this asset. We do look at a number of other assets, but more for post-cash flow acquisitions. So.
Well, and that being the case, I think there's a lot of upside potential for people to look at. And given the fact that the markets are experiencing a little bit of trouble right now, there's a lot of people that are saying there's a lot of upside potential in precious metals, period. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I believe there's a lot of upside. I mean, it's not my job to forecast the price of precious metals. I mean, I was happy when silver first went through $20, so I'm pretty ecstatic right now. I know some people saw it at $50 last year and believe silver's come down a lot, but I look at it as I took over the company at $13 to $14, and it's sitting in the low 30s now. So we're pretty excited about the price of the precious metals, and the upside on this company alone is not limited to acquiring new properties. We have 7,000 acres of land on our claim, of which probably only about 300 acres has ever been properly explored.
So there's ongoing for years projected?
Yeah, we have a limited resource right now because the resource was never the focus of the company. It was developing and beginning to mine, sort of like the way underground mines used to be. Mm-hmm. In our current finance and regulatory market, the focus is on resources known in the ground more than those that might be in the ground. Mm-hmm. We've had a number of large institutional investors send their own geologists to the site for that reason and invested in the company based on the potential.
So that, yeah, the third-party endorsement, really.
Yeah, we've got a few third-party endorsements. One of the major silver miners in the world owns a large stake in the company, as well as some very large institutions.
That's a very, very good key point. And I think referring people back to your website to learn a little bit more about that exact structure is really important. So I want to encourage everybody to go to huldrasilver.com. Before we go, I want to kind of point back to some of the significant information in the presentation that's on your website as well. So again, on the website, there's an investor presentation to learn a lot about these details. The overview states there's 51 new surface holes drilled on the current mine. There's 18 holes drilled on 2 of the exploration targets. There's a lot of information in this presentation package. Is there anything that hasn't made it to the presentation package that you think is something a talking point for today?
Well, there's stuff in there's stuff in the package that's not necessarily highlighted. Mm-hmm. I think the most significant thing is what basically we made the discovery on in 2010. We went back to in 2011, and we did another small surface cut 0.8 kilometers away from the mine, where we removed extremely high-grade galena right from surface that we're just in the final negotiating and contract phase on selling a small portion of that in the neighborhood of 36 tons direct to the smelter out of the ground, which is extremely rare to do, given smelter grades now are even a lot higher than they were back in 1985. Sort of the ballpark on what you need to send something direct to the smelter is minimum 100 ounces of silver and 60% lead, and we've pulled a sample straight out of the ground that exceeds that.
And that, I think, is one of the biggest reasons why people should take a look at this company. And just to point out, this company is public, huldrasilver.com. You can find them on the Venture Exchange under the symbol HDA. That's Helicopter David Alpha. And a lot of opportunity in this company, and they date back with a lot of history, a lot of qualified history, and some of the people involved in that history are still with the company. So I think that speaks volumes to the story.
Yes.
Well, thank you for coming in today. It was great talking to you. I'm going to keep my eye on this company, and I hope to talk to you again.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Ryan.
Canada's only weekly radio show on venture capital. This is Venture Capital Radio with Shannon Pearson on AM 650.